All right, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. First item of business is just a roll call.
Tom Sullivan here.
Richard Smith here.
Phyllis Goodson here.
Andrea Bennett here.
Jessica Cannon here.
DJ Klein here.
All right, perfect. Next thing is just the approval of the February minutes. Do we have any discussion about that before we move on to the next item? Is there any comments, questions, additions? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so we will approve the February minutes and move on to item number one, the EECBG City Council presentation updates and next steps from David.
Yeah, we presented our spending plan at last week's city council meeting. It was on the consent agenda. So it came early on and there were no questions. So we'll be proceeding with the plan as I think we presented it to all of y'all last week. You know, 100,000 or so for the EV pilot project, or excuse me, EV transition study. About 50,000 for the energy efficiency program in collaboration with our neighborhood services department. And then the remainder for solar at our new, hey, welcome Valjean. So just recognizing Valjean is here as well. So it's all ready to submit to Department of Energy. That'll be what I hope to be able to get that in this week, submit all the information through all of their hoops that I have to jump through to submit anything federal grant wise. So yeah, I'll be keeping you guys posted on that progress. And you know, with us pursuing some of the blueprint programs, it's supposed to get an expedited review process. So hopefully we can get that approval quickly and move on to getting an RFP together and finally getting our fleet transition study process moving forward. That'll be, gosh, that'll be a great goal to accomplish this year for the committee here, is to get that process going.
So are we able to start putting together the RFP while that's in the approval phase, or do we have to wait until we get the approval to then?
We begin getting the draft together.
Okay.
Yes.
Because it'd be great if, like, as soon as we know we have the funds allocated.
The only thing that we can't do is award.
Yeah,
We can,
right. Put it out for bid and
we can get it right up to that point. We just have to, until the application comes back, and we have to go back to council so we can put the money into the account so that we can spend.
And, you know, we can go ahead and begin working with our neighborhood services, this under the community services department, as far as, you know, their protocols and, you know, how they'll handle using those funds that we're allocating for that. So some good progress from.
Would it be helpful for you guys to have a recommendation from the committee to move ahead with that, or like, I don't think, yeah, it doesn't require anything from the council.
I think we're
Smooth sailing.
pathway is clear.
Cool.
And at this point, are you pretty confident when you put it out that there's the strong enough group that's gonna, I mean, people are gonna know about it and go after it for consultants that are potentially in that area?
We're probably gonna hunt around to other cities that have done this and just ask who they use and make sure that
They're
whoever they
aware.
used are aware. Cause I'm sure we'll be getting them from all over the place.
Right.
So this probably won't be done locally.
Oh, I wouldn't expect it
So,
to be.
yeah.
But in the past, I've known a couple groups that have done this type of thing, and knowing their names and stuff would be helpful.
If you have, if anybody on the committee knows of consultants that do this type of work, by all means, please provide the company name. Absolutely, yes, we would.
I've got a couple of examples from other North Carolina cities already that actually the reports and things from the companies that did it, so you can kind of see what their work looks like.
Yeah.
Um,
One thing I would, I mean, I'm sure you know this, but one thing I'd like to see in the scope is just like a set timeline for completion. I know, that some of the consultant and, engineering firms I've seen them like really dragging their feet lately, and what's supposed to be like a 2-month process turns into like an 8-month process. Obviously, we want to get more than that, so I would just say in the scope of work, but some kind of, deadline, time frame on how long they have to complete the studies. So they can be held accountable for that.
I think we were already kind of brainstorming kind of how long we thought this would take. I mean, a few months, 6 months max.
We do, on certain types of other work, we do, schedule commitment,
Sure.
just as a, submit a statement as a part of your
Sure.
proposal that commits
Yeah.
you to a schedule.
Sounds good.
While we have a significant sized fleet, it's certainly not huge by other city standards, so.
And as part of like the proposal review, I assume you guys look at minority or businesses, give them ratings or points or
We
whatever.
don't do it for this one. We're doing really, really bad at paying attention to what we recommend.
All right, well, I just figured I'd
No,
put it out there.
I'm just saying, we want to set the example that we want others to follow. right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, I agree. I just thought it was a good chance to poke fun at you.
Yeah.
That sounds good to me. Yeah. Nice that we'll have progress moving on that. For the solar installation, is that solar install dependent on us having enough because I know like the funds are just kind of like the residual, what we have left goes towards that. And I know we have like a ballpark amount allocated. Is that solar install dependent on the amount of funds that we are able to use for that, or that's gonna go ahead and either way?
Yeah, the ideal candidate for that would be for the parks maintenance facility. And that's not, it's not being planned as an alternate bid. So, but there is concern about the overall cost of the project.
Sure.
So this would help.
Gotcha.
us-
Offset that.
help us
Yeah,
get
alleviate those.
help us get off on the right foot.
Yeah.
On that project.
Is there any possibility for pardon my ignorance, I don't know where the Parks and Rec maintenance facility is located. Is there any opportunity to incorporate like an education piece into the solar install? Whether it's just like a plaque that says, hey, this building's powered by solar electricity, or like, I don't know if is there a community facing part of that? No. Okay.
It's across the street from the wastewater treatment plant, so
Okay.
down on River Road. So I'm
Not a lot of foot traffic there.
But
Sure.
it'd still be a great video opportunity.
Yeah,
I mean, something
I-
that could be done for your social media that could continue to.
I think there is an opportunity to do some signage and there'll be two large cisterns out there as well to
Nice.
for some rainwater reuse. So, yeah, we've been a lot of thought put into that design.
We're also pursuing LEED Silver for that
I was about to say
project
that's gonna be my next question.
as well. So, the LEED has some educational, even if it's just plaques on a wall, just kind of pointing out the green
Yeah.
features. Cisterns or the solar or LED lighting.
I think it's definitely an opportunity with
Recycled content of materials inside the building. It's,
so many of those,
I wasn't aware of that, were you?
with so many of those different features kind of located in that one site. I mean, that sounds like a great opportunity for, like like a city profile or like a piece about it. I wanna make sure that you guys get recognized and the city gets recognized for this work, cause it's like checking off so many boxes and it's like, you can get it all done in one place. It's not like you have to do a story for this, a story for that. It's like, we get all, you get the lead, you get the cisterns, you get like, you get it all in one place in one package, like kill three birds with one stone. One thing that I would like to see, I don't know if we need to vote on it or if we can just request the information, is as you speak with, the neighborhood projects, sorry, what are they called, the $50,000.
Just neighborhood services,
As you speak with the neighborhood services program, I'd like to see the information on like how they're, not really like vetting the customers, but like making sure that there's not, like, where I was kind of saying like people are like, so people can't double dip, or like where people are already getting assistance from Duke or some of the other programs.
They have, they're gonna be using a pre-established program. I mean, we're not asking them to necessarily
Like we're getting to
create something brand new, but
Mhm.
the vetting of the eligible applicants that would be benefiting from this already fit into
that category.
their,
that
kind of their,
process.
right. But yeah, we can certainly share that if y'all are interested.
Yeah, I'd just be curious to see how that process works. Okay. Any other comments or discussion, questions, for Dave and David about the EDCBG process moving forward? Doesn't look like it. Okay.
What's the timeline from getting notification that the grant does get accepted?
I
Do
believe,
we know?
I believe if we're like using the blueprint, projects,
Yeah,
they say, like no more than 60 days, I believe, so within 1 to 2 months.
Okay.
Although the deadline for everybody submitting is coming up quickly, so I wouldn't be surprised if they get a big rush of projects right towards the end of the application period, so I'm trying to get ours in as soon as possible to kind of get it in front of that wave.
Sounds good. All right, so we can move on to item number 2, Wilmington State and Federal Legislative Agenda.
I was gonna ask which one was it, Mr. Mays?
Yeah, so, this came up on council's agenda. And I'm sure by reading it, you can see there's a gap, there's a hole there. Doesn't necessarily provide a lot of connection to the clean energy goals that we have set. And part of this is related to a personnel issue that we have going on. I say personnel, it's not a problem, it's just that staff person is not available right now, and has not been available for about a couple of months. So the effort to get this created was cobbled together, for lack of a better word. It could have been a better process, but it could have been a better process if our staff person had been here and was actually working on it. So I'm not trying to be evasive, but I'm just saying our legislative affairs person just hasn't been available since I think early November, or maybe mid-November. So I saw that there's nothing on here that directly tied to clean energy goals. And thought, well, that seems pretty important for this committee, so,
Is this, so is this,
this is passed.
okay, so this is finalized.
This has been finalized. It did not, I think it's a relevant discussion for this committee to have something that we can potentially recommend if that's what y'all choose to do, to help advocate for legislation that would further what our goals are as a committee. There's certainly a possibility of developing a recommendation that could be added to future legislative agendas. I don't know if there's a possibility of advocating for something that would change or add, supplement to what's here. But that's certainly a question that I'm willing to ask. I think there was recognition that, this was put together without all our resources in place to do a kind of get everything that we wanted in here. And so that's why I'm bringing it to y'all, is that we can I'm certainly willing to take whatever y'all want and present it and see what happens. It may be that it's something that we put for next year, or it may be something that we advocate for to see if they can do something now to supplement what's there. And that may gain some traction. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it does.
Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Based on the way that the four areas of strategic focus are written, I feel like a supplemental addition would not be too far potentially or unwarranted, given that the language includes sustainable transportation network and city infrastructure, and creating a safe and healthy and engaged community. I feel like clean energy can kind of tie into those, where we can say, yeah, the way that you get to the sustainable, transportation and city infrastructure is by setting up these policies and procedures so that long term we get a better ROI on, on what we're paying for. So maybe it's something where instead of saying, I think that we can fit some of our recommendations into the focus areas and just target it towards that language, as if it's like a bid or something that we're trying to align our goals to the way that the RFP is written, in some like a similar way. Assuming I'm looking at the right attachment, which I think I am, right? The one that starts dear mayor and council members.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Cool.
can you copy?
I
Yeah,
have a-
so, yeah, I was, Andrea, I was down the same lines with you, which is, looking at those four focus areas and trying to figure out if anything that we're trying to accomplish can be interweaved into these same ones. And I know we've talked about, minority and women-owned businesses, for some of the opportunities, which would really be the inclusive part of community. And affordability is a big deal when we talk about clean energy, continued rate increase. So I agree that we probably should have at our next meeting a kind of a working session, or maybe this is the opportunity for us to look at what our objectives were that we set out earlier this beginning of the year. We said, here's what our priorities are going to be, and try to figure out how they can tie into these.
Yeah, economic growth too. You could have some things.
Yeah.
So in my mind, whether it's a revision or a supplement, I'm fine with either, whatever city staff thinks city council will be more responsive to, like whatever's a lighter lift, for them. I'm fine with either, whether it be a revision where they add like a, number 5, or whether they add a supplemental memo or an addendum to this, including a section about about clean energy and the sustainability piece. But I feel like we should advocate for that. I wonder. I wonder if we have the time today, like we didn't have, this is kind of a light meeting, we didn't have a real full agenda, so, we can, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can vote to add an item to the agenda, correct?
Sure, yeah, I don't,
So we can,
not necessarily even have to vote, I think if there's
Okay.
just some additional areas we
Okay.
want to discuss.
so then I would say, why don't we plan on tacking on item number 4, discussion about, a legislative agenda supplement or addendum, to the end of this meeting, and we can spend the remaining time we might have after item number 3.
I mean, we don't even need to add item. It should be covered under item 2, right?
Yeah,
Sure. Sure, yeah. So do you wanna, I guess I'll ask the committee, would you prefer to discuss that now or wait until after we discuss item number 3 and circle back to it?
Let's knock out number 3 and come back. That's what I think.
I would even offer that I think there's some probably easy tie-ins back to some of these state level goals.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's, in that case, let's go to number 3. We'll do number 3 and then we can circle back to this.
Yeah, and I didn't print out as an attachment for all of y'all online, the whole North Carolina Priority Action Plan. But I did print out the executive summary for those here. So I'll just be referring to kind of the executive summary portion is in particular their section on where it details their priority actions that they're going to be focusing on. This plan is part of their process for filing for the as part of the carbon reduction plan, greenhouse gas reduction plan for the state. So they have to submit this plan on how they want to spend their proposed funding. So they were, having to identify, exactly what the priority actions were going to be. And, you can, I would suggest as you have time following this meeting, go back into some of the pertinent sections within the climate action plan and just kind of read through some of these action items. They're certainly appropriate for some of the areas that we're working on. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on this process as they submit this plan back to the Department of Energy and see how much funding they get and then tie into these action areas where possible. We've already got a notification from the State Energy Office of a local government roundtable meeting that they're going to be hosting a webinar in early April. Dave and I both have it on our calendars to attend. And at that time, if there are like some particular projects that we want to mention for the Wilmington area, we'll have that opportunity to do so. So I'm sure we'll be brainstorming a little bit prior to that meeting. I think it's on April the 2nd. So it's a few weeks to go until then, but
Dave, could either of the Daves actually, could I ask you? So some of the municipalities around the state that are being a little more beefier, they have beefier environmental projects than we do. They have just more budget allotted for these things and maybe even more staff. Are we coordinating to find out like what Durham, what Chapel Hill, what Asheville, what Charlotte, what people are asking for, so we can make sure that because sometimes, just not to cheat off their homework, but we might as well kind of keep an eye on all of that and not recreate the wheel as to, some of our input. Are you in coordination with any of those folks?
Yes. Yeah, there, a lot of those are all part of my Southeast Sustainability Directors Network.
Right, okay,
And we've got a monthly North Carolina call. And, yeah, this topic is often on those monthly calls as far as, what we're all doing.
cool.
And again, I'm sure a lot of them will be on that call coming up in early April. Because it's a opportunity for direct conversation back with, folks who are providing the funds for this, so.
Got it, okay, great.
But anyway, just to kind of highlight, some of the priority measures that they're recommending and, item number 3, that they, I don't know if you guys are able to see that executive summary portion. That's kind of where I'm talking about right now.
Okay.
Increasing the number of zero emission and electric vehicles to state and local government fleets. So as we're,
Mm-hmm,
perfect tie-in with our fleet transition plan as we're identifying vehicles that are going to be, making the most sense to transition and having a kind of a schedule for that, perhaps. Hopefully we'll be able to tie into either, it'll be interesting to see what mechanism they use to, support this, if it's direct incentive or some kind of a grant program, but that one will certainly be of interest for us locally. I mean, a number of these, 1 through 15 will all have applicability, but some certainly more than others. Even item number 4, I know they just had a big press announcement last week or a week before that in regard to funds for the port down here. So, action measure number 4 is,
mm-hmm,
emissions for the port. And I think I went into the actual plan, and I know they're looking at being able to reduce the amount of truck traffic that's transporting stuff out of the port and increasing their train capacity there. I think they're limited right now to the number of cars that they can pull out of the port. I think it's like 16,000 cars or something a month, I think.
I missed that announcement. What can you give a quick synopsis of what that was about?
They do talk about it within the action plan. If you want to look into that section, PJ, I'm not sure what page it's on, but I know the port is limited to the number of cars, railroad cars that they can have going in and out of the city right now. But part of this action plan is working to be able to increase that capacity and reduce the number of diesel trucks on the road. So, much more efficient to transport all those goods by train as opposed to truckload.
Yeah, that's on, I see that now. It's on page 55.
So, not directly tied to the work that we're doing, but, certainly reducing the greenhouse gas emission levels here community-wide and just more efficient transportation sector. So I know a part of that is perhaps part of the rail realignment and realigning the way the tracks come in along Front Street.
Part of the project that's going on right now is to allow an increase in speed. Not sure you really tell it, being I think up to 5 miles per hour more within the city. If you don't know it, there'll be
Crossing gates.
crossing gates. Thank you. Crossing gates. There's a
oh, for the
road,
trains.
there will be crossing gates. And there will be at least one, there may be 2 roads that are actually being closed off, so those roads won't cross the railroad track. So they're trying to, and they put new rails
Yep.
throughout the city. So they're trying to upgrade the rail for that increased capacity. Trains will be longer.
Yeah, PJ, what's that number? Did you see on that page from number of cars up to?
It was on page 55. It was under. It's on page 55. Let's see. I don't know if that helps or not.
And we just have the.
Page 47 of the documents, page 55 of the PDF.
Yeah, we just had the executive summary printed out. I didn't do the whole document.
Yeah, so it says in here that right now, at present, service is capped at 1,600 containers per year due to the position and length of railroad tracks for loading intermodal flat cars and lack of storage for cars awaiting loads at the Port of Wilmington. So what I read into that is that if there's a train there, they can't unload it and have them just stored. They have to move from train directly onto boat. They're going to complete a project by the end of 2024 to build a dedicated intermodal rail yard at the port that will expand rail capacity to more than 50,000 container rail movements annually. So that's almost triple what we have now, or it is triple of what we would have now. And they would potentially divert nearly 2,500 container boxes from trucks to rail over the next decade. 250,000 trucks. And it would, as you said, it would reduce the greenhouse gases and other pollutants as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I learned something reading through that particular measure as well. They're also trying to do shore power. So shore power from the port directly to the ships. So the ships don't have to idle while they're sitting there being unloaded. I never realized they just sit there and idle for who knows how long. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Now we just need an Amtrak. And we'll be good.
Yeah, there's something else in here besides shore power, which I as well didn't know, but it says support equipment electrification at the port. Support equipment electrification at both the deep water ports such as fork trucks and small on-site vehicles will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions locally and provide immediate reductions. This activity may involve replacing outdated equipment initially and scaling up electric equipment in the future to meet the demands of at the ports. Good. Ports are doing they're doing their due diligence too.
So we're mainly supposed to provide comments to this once we read it through, or just? look
I
at it?
really just for information, just so we're aware of the plans that the state is pushing forward, and we're just general awareness where we may be able to tie into this and tap into.
Yeah.
Rate increases.
Given that so many of these outlined measures fall kind of directly into our wheelhouse of priorities for ourselves, I don't have to tell you this, but as an observation, like it goes without saying that we need to keep a close eye on how DEQ rolls this out, so that any grants, funding, fixed amount rebates, whatever it might be that come out for this, we can take advantage of. It's like they're waving a report in our face that says like, hey, we're getting ready to give you a lot of money. That sounds good. So
Yeah,
for all the boxes that we're trying to check, that really fits. So.
yeah, I mean.
Is there any historical data that talks about air quality and that we can track and trend and say, hey, our greenhouse gas emissions or greenhouse gas air quality was at X on X date, and now it's Y on 2024, and we think it'll be Z by 2030 or whatever the situation is. Like, I know we talk about every bit helps, but we've talked about trains and boats and stuff that we don't really, our committee doesn't directly impact, but when you look at it as a whole, we've gone down this greenhouse gas conversation before, but how are we tracking and trending it? Like, we know, Dave, I know you are tracking what the greenhouse gas impact is from the city of Wilmington, but do we know what it is at a monitoring station to be able to look at that over a period of time?
Are you talking just air quality wise or?
Yeah, air quality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of resources
I mean,
to,
do we have one locally? Is there a local monitoring station?
and I know the airport has one.
Okay.
And, in general, compared to, some of the other more populous areas of the state, our air quality is always quite good here, which actually hurts us when we're looking at doing like diesel emission reduction
Right.
grants. And, funding for that,
That
most
money
of
goes
it,
to where, yeah.
most of it goes to other parts of the state, because, we get the, ocean breezes here and not as, obviously not as big a population center. I mean, we're obviously growing as well, but
I was gonna say for the next couple of years anyway.
yeah. So, but yeah, PJ, there are resources to look at what our historical air quality has been here in the area that, we can certainly refer to that.
Yeah, because what we're doing in the city obviously impacts that as a whole, but then we have these other fringe groups like the port and the county who are doing things that are important for us to highlight. It wasn't anything we did, but it's still an impact on the city of Wilmington itself.
Yeah.
I don't know, does anyone think I'm going down a rabbit hole that we shouldn't be going down, or just all align with kind of our clean energy goals?
I don't.
My understanding is when we're talking about air quality, we're not really talking about CO2. We're talking about particulate emissions, different volatile organic compounds. And so it's really apples and oranges, right? Our CO2 in the atmosphere, our parts per trillion versus like pollutants. Aren't those two different things? I feel like our job is to measure our carbon footprint of the
Yeah.
city.
Yep.
And what's in the air and what our region is emitting, that sounds like it's sort of outside our. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. So Jessica, let me restate my statement.
Got it.
My statement is there are things that are being done that impact greenhouse gas emissions, like the clean energy footprint that we do, that we should be cognizant of and not take credit, but at least have some awareness and make others aware, such as the things that are going on the port, right? They're going to be able to take more rail cars, which means less trucks on the road, which means less greenhouse gases. And the same thing with the ships. They're going to have shore power, so they're not sitting there idling, putting in CO2 emissions into the county or into the city. And so what I was saying was, while it's not an objective of us to monitor or track this or speak on it, it's probably worth educational to the community to be able to say, hey, we're doing this, but also here are things other groups are doing to lower the emissions in the city.
Gotcha. Just so we're kind of keep a bird's eye view on stuff.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I don't disagree with your sentiment. Like if it were you or me sitting in a room talking, I'd 100% agree with you. The only hesitation I have is like you said, this is a conversation we've had numerous times before, and the conclusion that was reached in previous meetings is that like we don't really involve ourselves with greenhouse gas emissions and carbon. And so I worry if we start directing people to talk about carbon and we start thinking about carbon and GHGs, then we're kind of going back on what the stated mission was and scope was earlier on in the committee's.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating for us to track it. I'm talking about like the sustainability report that is put out that talks about stuff like this. I think that's important, that even though the city of Wilmington is not doing anything at the port, it's still a very close to the impacted area that it should be at least highlighted.
So what would you think about us doing something like making a recommendation to city staff to, incorporate or make sure to publicize like those things that like we can recommend to city staff to track those things and not necessarily make it part of our.
I agree. But right, we're not after greenhouse gases. We went down that, we opened that can of worms way too many times. But I still think it's important for us that at least somebody is watching it, not us. Not we're We're purely after carbon and clean energy.
And I don't think, I agree, I don't think it would be out of our scope to make a recommendation to, recommend to city staff that they track, whether it's carbon or IAQ or whatever it might be. I think it's not out of our scope, because that, like you said, that is at least adjacent to what we're doing. And so it makes sense for city staff to have that information as well, so. I wouldn't disagree with you there.
And we are, and we will continue.
Okay.
We're, not only from municipal operations, but, keep an eye on idea of what community-wide what's looking like as well. Yeah, and it just last, one of the measures I'll point out, obviously directly tied to us, is like item number 6, or that they list is increase the amount of electricity generated from low and no carbon energy resources. So, that's 100%. So it'll be interesting to see what resources they throw at that action area, whether that's leaning harder on the utilities commissions to hold Duke to, meeting the carbon plans that the state, set into law, meeting 50% reduction by 2030. So all of that will only help us here attain our energy goals. So. Direct line.
I'm curious if, do not remember which one. One of our council members was particularly interested in landfill gas emissions. And so I'm curious whether he's aware of this report where that's listed here specifically on there.
That was Mr. Joyner.
Yeah, I mean, you could relate all this, probably 80% of it's what we do or what we're interested in, minus if it's, port or a landfill or I mean, every single thing you can relate to either social impact or energy efficiency or clean energy, like all the 6 items that we highlighted.
All right, any other discussion on this item? Not hearing any?
This is sort of related. This is for one of the Daves. So my understanding was that at a recent agenda review, the discussion was on the table about requiring new developments where there's going to be parking spots put in for residential projects, that there be 1 or 2 sort of electrical infrastructure for potential EV charging stations down the road, and that there were a couple of council members that were pushing back against it. And I'm wondering if you have a sense of where that stands, and that seems to me something that's just so common sense at this point, that almost every, local government across the country is, moving in that direction. Just put in the basic infrastructure. And I think we got pushback from maybe Luke Waddell and one other person. I was wondering what the status of that is.
Specifically, I don't know, Jessica, but I'd be happy to find out and try and send a response out to the committee once I dig in.
Okay, I think it was the agenda. Was the agenda review this morning for this next 2 weeks? Where are we in the cycle?
One last week, last Monday.
It was last Monday. So that may have been it was something that, was going to come up in the future. It's not something that's going to pop onto the agenda, I think, soon. So anyway, I think it would be helpful for us to make sure we know if these issues are coming up, and just kind of do our due diligence to make sure we know what they're discussing, and if there's a role for us to kind of weigh in on it. I don't want to create headaches, but this is kind of the purpose, one of the reasons that we're all assembled here, is to help provide information.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks directly to measure number 2 in the state's action plan. is
Right.
Installing public electric vehicle charging network accessible to all North Carolinians. So, you know, they don't. They're not
And
special.
Mr. Caudle's letter to the city council regarding upcoming legislative planning for the year. So that's already signed, that's a done deal. And I mean, I think I missed our last month's meeting. I don't know if we had a chance to know that was coming our way ahead of time or not.
We did not.
Okay,
And that, I was explaining, maybe you missed this part. Unfortunately, our legislative affairs person is
Oh,
not
right.
available for a while. And so they tried to cobble something together. So it's not that we missed the ball, but
got it. No, I zoned out when you were saying all that. Yep, totally remember. Sorry.
drink that Celsius now, keep awake.
Well, so that's, if there's no more discussion on item number 3, it's a good transition back to item number 2.
Oh, wait, we didn't do, Energize NC solar for all.
Oh,
Yeah,
I apologize.
and you know, it ties back into the state's action plan. I mean, within the action plan itself, they reference the Solar for All and Energize NC, a group that's going to be, you know, working to, you know, the Energize NC is mostly focused on residential solar. You know, but they're going to have, you know, they applied for $250 million to implement this across the state. So, again, they're hoping to, I think they're anticipating hearing back on the award of this very soon. So, you know, perhaps even by the next meeting, we may have news that they were successful in getting, if not the full 250, you know, hopefully they do. I think it's going to be an amazing program. I think it goes through it as they have it laid out. So, again, this is just a update kind of for your information. Things are happening at the state level. You know, we're eagerly anticipating hearing what the results of their application to the Department of Energy on this grant is. So, again, there'll be some opportunity for us to provide some input for the local Wilmington area, and you know, we're again have opportunity to join in on webinars and meetings that they're hosting for, you know, rolling this program out. So,
How do you think we'll receive I mean, it says 60 grants to state, blah, 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 municipalities.
it'll be a state-run program, but
Yeah.
you know, there will be. I'm sure they'll be looking for like local partners, particularly like, you know, nonprofits and as they're trying to roll this out to the low income portions of our.
Would you work with the group that you're working for the E?
No, it would be separate from that. But, you know, all focused on, you know, this is certainly focused more on implementing solar in the residential sector, you know, whereas you know, what we're doing with the ECBG is focused more on energy efficiency. So, you know, that would be a good step to do before you put solar on the roof, is make sure the homes are as energy efficient as possible. So you're not just providing.
Yeah, well, I wonder if like the city of Wilmington has any facilities that are targeted to low income or disadvantaged communities that can take advantage of it. No. Well, I mean, I'm just seeing it says grants to municipalities, and then it's saying community solar and targeting low income and disadvantaged communities. I don't know if there's any buildings that you guys operate that's kind of targeting those low income or disadvantaged communities, like a food bank or something.
We don't own any like that.
Okay.
No. Now, the county may have something, I'm not sure. I mean, they're more on the social side than the city is. We do The neighborhood and housing, housing and neighborhood department now that we're teaming up with,
Mhm.
they operate a program that supports that. And that's why we teamed up with them, but we don't have a separate facility for that.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see, like, depending on how these funds start getting allocated, you know, in my mind, it would be something like where I don't pretend, I will say I am not a subject matter expert on the best implementation of like social equity, programs, but from a science, from an energy efficiency standpoint, I would kind of lean into what David had just mentioned, where like if you're gonna put solar on the home, it should be energy efficient first. It should be weatherized first. Because you're not maximizing the value of that solar if you don't have an energy efficient, like an energy of a secure building envelope. So, you know, if you have a homeowner who has their heat on and all their windows open in February, which is something that I've seen as an energy auditor for Duke, like putting solar panels on their homes will help lower their bills, but they're still going to be using significantly more energy than someone who has like a solid building shell would get a significantly better value out of it than someone that doesn't. So I wonder if there's a way we could partner with the neighborhood program or Duke or something and find people that have already had their homes weatherized. That would be a
Kind of their last point here on the back page, is weatherization and repairs are also eligible under the program, so we'll be tapping into that. No, I think this is going to be, I think, run in collaboration. I mean, it's kind of being run out of the State Energy Office, which the weatherization program is part of that, so I'm sure we'll tie that in together to make sure that, yeah, we're not wasting all that solar that's being installed.
Yeah, and we'll learn a lot from what we're getting ready to do that may springboard us into something that we can look to continue with the larger pot. Sure. So that's another good reason to do that.
No, it definitely ties back into that type of program they're doing in other portions of the state. Kind of several local governments collaborate together to do those solarized campaigns. I know I brought that up. I mean, that was one possible use for the EECBG funds, was doing a solarized campaign, but it's really more effective if you can get collaboration from a number of local governments all in the same area, like, you know, us, New Hanover County, Brunswick County, Pender County, to impact the whole area as opposed to just trying to do it here within the city limits. So that's an area we can try to pull together a collaborative team at some point down the road. It's certainly been really effective up in the Raleigh area, and I think they've actually set national records for the amount of people in the area that signed on to their solarized campaign. So yeah, if you get the word out, good PR about it, it can really be impactful. So I think their campaign is called Solarize the Triangle, if anybody's ever interested.
So when you started the community offshore wind organization.
Yeah.
There's a good score.
David, was there anything that they mentioned that was particularly impactful for the campaign, a method of communication? Or did they just kind of do a all-around attack on different media?
I think there's several local governments signed on to be part of it, and I'm trying to remember the name of the organization. I think that's spearheading it. It's slipping my mind right now, but it was really You know, like Raleigh, Cary, Durham, Orange County, I think they all signed on to the program up in that area. And one group is kind of spearheading the programmatic portions of it. But definitely, you know, getting them they were all really big with their social media campaign about it, and they hosted a lot of community events for people to come and talk about it. So I would say just a very well-rounded campaign, very, very well organized.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Just circling back to item, is there any more discussion on item number 3?
Really just, informational to keep you guys up to date on bigger picture here in the state.
So circling back to item number 2 then, looking at what we may want to recommend as an addition or an addendum to the legislative agenda. You know, I guess I would solicit comments and feedback from the rest of the committee. I would say I'm a little bit surprised, honestly, at the specificity of some of these legislative agenda items. You know, I know in here we've talked about how city council likes to keep things kind of broad to allow for interpretation and like maneuverability. But some of these things are pretty specific, like support commitment of necessary federal and state resources to fund the full replacement cost of the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. There's not a lot of room for interpretation or like wiggle room there. So I don't know that it's kind of out of our purview to make more specific recommendations, not necessarily like do this or do that, but you know, I don't know. It's just food for thought. I'm just a little bit surprised to see some of how specific some of these things are.
Well, keep in mind, some of it comes from the council members.
They want these things.
There are certain things that
Of their focus,
that they may have come to the manager and said, I really want this on the menu for this year. So
I mean, should we try to word it using words that they've used in their various
absolutely.
points?
Like,
I mean,
They're
sustainable.
talking about programs that emphasize resiliency and equity. I mean, and the resiliency piece of it, it's like, I just sat in on a webinar talking about how hospitals are implementing microgrids for hurricanes and that kind of stuff, like city council.
This is already approved, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure. So like, I don't think we're gonna change anything that they already put in there.
No, and I'm not saying, I wasn't advocating that we should try. I was just stating that I was surprised by how specific some of these things were. But no, I think we would just recommend that they add, you know, whether they revise this or they create a separate supplement to it, that they add a portion addressing the city's clean energy goals and.
I think that's, and that's just an opinion, but I think that's better served for us to get on the radar for next year. I don't know how often they change these things or.
I think this year may be a good opportunity for it because of how it was so cobbled together, and from the sound of what I'm hearing, city council is aware that it's not as clean of a document as they would typically expect, so they're more open to revisions or supplements than they.
Let me ask you guys this. Is there something specific that, because I think it would be within our purview to say, you know, in receipt of this, hoping that if there are additions or addendums done over the coming, you know, months, that the Clean Energy Advisory Board would recommend, if we have 1 or 2 things, we would add to it. And then also, I think we should march out a schedule and be ready for this next year and sort of have maybe a small part of each of our working sessions, you know, starting next month or the month after, tackling things that we might like to ask for.
Yeah, let me just.
So kind of doing both. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, let me just be clear. I'm willing to present it if the committee
Okay,
strongly enough now that we'd like to supplement what was done. May come back and said, just wait until next year.
right.
So
I don't think it hurts for us to, what would we put on it? What are y'all thinking we would put on there?
I mean, my gut feels just says something along the effects of, support clean energy. I don't want to refer them to another document, but basically, support the objectives by the Clean Energy Committee. I mean, that's pretty open-ended. I know we just talked about how specific it was about certain things, but I think we're probably going to get one bullet is my point. And how do you get as much as you can out of that bullet?
I would support that.
I think given that the majority of the clean energy stuff that we've talked about is dependent on Duke's energy mixture, and the fact that Duke's carbon plan is like kind of a hot topic right now, I think it would make sense for us to include something about, advocating for more clean energy in Duke's carbon plan, because that's where we get, right now, that's where we get 100% of our energy from. And our assumptions about meeting our goals are based on their carbon plan. And so the cleaner that is, the better for all of us. So I would posit we should include something in there about that. I mean, if city council thinks it's worthwhile to include things as specific as like oppose modifications to the current room occupancy tax distribution formula, then like, I don't think it's out of line for us to add something that says like support commitment of clean energy within the Duke carbon plan.
See, I don't know if we want to specifically call out the Duke Energy Carbon Plan. That's just my opinion. But I do think we should call out things that we have control over. And I get that there's some federal and this is state legislation. But I would be more likely to support something that would say along the lines of support clean energy initiatives through state funding for energy efficiency implementation. Right, that's one of the things we know we have an opportunity for to get our carbon down. And we all know that Duke Energy, as it's written today in the carbon plan, will hit our objectives for us. But I don't believe that should be us just sitting here saying we're not going to do anything, which is why I'm advocating and I've been advocating for energy efficiency. No matter what Duke does, we should still strive to do it. And then when you look at the cost aspect of where things are going with the implementation of the carbon plan, that's why I'm afraid of saying that we want to support the carbon plan, because that comes at a cost. Where if you get state funds and you introduce that into the cities and you're able to do energy efficiency, it's not at a ratepayer's expense. So that's the only reason I'm hesitant. And so I think if we're going to say something, it would be, again, support clean energy initiatives through state funding for energy efficiency.
I've got a sentence, if it works. Support safe and sustainable energy policies that yield economic growth that equally benefit all communities in the region.
John for representative.
It doesn't say clean energy, but I mean, you might run into a wall if you say clean energy.
I don't know why I feel this way, because for the last however many months I've been serving on this committee, this has not been my take. But for whatever reason, reading through this agenda or this legislative agenda, like, I'm more inclined to say we should be a little bit more aggressive or assertive than we typically are. I don't know why, but to me, like, just having a bullet point in here that says like support clean energy is like kind of toothless. Like, I don't really see the point of asking city council to put it in. It's like, in my mind, it's like, okay, cool, you know, and then they can just throw it back in the closet and like move on with their day.
Well, how do they use these bullet points? Do they kind of, in the meetings, do they say, well, according to this, you know, at this bullet point, we're pursuing this?
Well, say if we want to recommend, say, you know, having them sign another public comment letter, we could reference back to the resolution. Legislation.
Isn't this also direct instructions to our lobbyists? Or no?
It's also messaging to our local delegation,
Right.
so it's the.
Should we have a sentence? Should we have a sentence that's maybe a little more toothful or teethy, where we say, please advocate for any and all federal and state funding that will help us transition to, you know, cleaner, insert XYZ language that we're comfortable with, and especially as it helps with economic growth and projects that have a good return on investment. Something that sort of says, don't forget to, you know, advocate to make sure we get our slice of the pie. I mean, that might be a way of kind of signaling that we want to remind them. And it's not controversial because it talks about economic growth and return on investment. I mean, again, it's not really teethful, but at least.
I would be fine with something like that. I wouldn't have any objection.
I have one alternative proposal just for thought, is to not request a separate bullet point to the list of points that's already been agreed upon and added, but a, almost like an errata fix and say, oh, you wrote these agenda, you know, or this legislative agenda, and it looks like some of our clean energy work that we've been doing has been left out. We're including some, you know, suggested edits to the existing bullet points, and say like that the work that we're doing is in line with everything you've proposed. We just could be clearer about it. And so the fifth bullet point under the state legislative agenda, you know, support transportation and infrastructure funding that is reflective of the growth and needs of the Wilmington region and our state, placing emphasis on equity and natural disaster accessibility concerns. Like, I would argue that clean energy or energy efficiency is part of that transportation and infrastructure, and the needs of the Wilmington region and our state. It just isn't very clearly defined. You know, it's like they have that bullet point, our work feeds into that sustainability, but it's not, you know, clearly stated. Additionally, 3 down from that, support a consistent funding source for coastal infrastructure and shoreline protection that includes beaches, inlets, and waterway. Like, it's like, and anywhere that there is infrastructure or funding or needs of the area, or even the one below it, of the ability of communities to address local challenges. Like, local challenges includes the affordability of like clean energy for your home within those communities. Like, so maybe there's just a couple key phrases or words we can include in the bullet points as they exist, so that it's not perhaps as such a, you know, oh, we're asking you to add these additional things that you feel like maybe you haven't reviewed, of like, oh, no, we're all working towards the same thing. Y'all just forgot that you have this whole arm that is doing this work, and you can also highlight through the things that are on your agendas as well.
So one comment about bullet number 3. When I read transportation infrastructure, I still feel this way, but when I read it, I was thinking of roads and bridges and especially when it talks about natural disaster accessibility concerns. That's people's ability to get out of harm's way. I didn't read infrastructure as an electrical infrastructure, but I do like potentially where your head's going on the carbon part for the vehicles that we're trying I think we could interweave that in there. We may be even able to interweave it in the one above, right? Support a strong and ongoing state response to the discharge of chemicals that may result impairment of our waterways, air and drinking water, I think we could, discharge of chemicals and carbon or greenhouse gases or chemicals including greenhouse gases. And, that would capture the carbon part for us. But I do like your idea of, can we massage these bullets versus adding a bullet?
And maybe the first bullet point under the federal legislative agenda is even one that fits our use case the best, because that one, to your point about, emergency response and everything, that one is support additional funding for infrastructure, local transportation priorities, which that could be open, federal transportation grants and programs, and public transportation programs that emphasize resiliency and equity. I mean, I think that sustainability and clean energy fit right into those otherwise objectives. So maybe it's even at the federal agenda that we can kind of zhuzh the language a little bit and target that a little bit more towards what we would want to put it towards.
So I think it depends on how you look at it, like I totally get where your head is at, where it's like, instead of making a ask where it's like, hey, we need our own section, cause like we're important and we've gotta have this, it's more like, hey, can we just, just acknowledge this in this section. I see that, see that point of view, but I also, if I was a council person, to me, that would look like, if we're bringing back comments or we'd like to see this added here, this added here, then it's like, oh, so they're asking me to review this whole thing, this whole document again, and reconsider this whole document again. Versus if we give them one bullet point or one sentence, it's like, oh, they just want to tack this on at the end, sure, yeah, whatever. Just thinking about from a city council perspective, what's a bigger ask to me, hey, we have this one sentence or this one bullet point, we want you to tack in as a supplement. It seems like an easier review process if I'm a city council person than hey, we need to review these 6 bullet points that they have revisions to. And I would defer to city staff on what they think is the heavier lift or is the less likely thing for city council to be open to. I don't know. That's just if I was trying to put myself in their shoes, that's how I would look at it.
Well, Andrea, the conversation that you just had was, except for the different words, all the points that you made, I made to my boss when I read this agenda. So I think, to your point, it's there if you want it to be there, if you want to read it into it, but it's not, it doesn't stand out. And that's the reason that I brought it up to him. He understood and said, bring it to this committee and let's have some discussion around it. So there's any number of ways that we can go. We can change what's there, which I think may be harder because this is already an approved resolution.
Right.
We can supplement what's there. We can add something to it. And if there doesn't have to be anything, there doesn't have to be a response, because as Andrea said, you can make the connection because the wording is there, somewhat loosely, somewhat less defined, but you can make that connection. I felt it was important enough to bring it to y'all to hear your opinion. Is it strong enough to satisfy you? Would we want to advocate to change something this year? Or would we want to be prepared, as Jessica said, to be ready with something for next year?
To answer your questions, no, it's not strong enough language in my opinion. And yes, we should advocate for something this year because I don't see the harm in it. It's we could kick the can down to next year and have just be prepared for the agenda then, but why not ask for something now? It's not like we run out of, we ask for it this year and they say no, and it's okay, well, we're done, this is our job, here is to advocate for these things and make these recommendations, so I don't see why we shouldn't. feel like the committee probably feels the same way because we're sitting here having a discussion about it instead of just saying like, it's not really worth tackling. I think it's more just, we're trying to work out the logistics of what's the best way to present that.
So let me make a
Right.
suggestion for
You
y'all.
do.
Y'all decide amongst yourself if, to answer your first question, is it something that's worth, trying to advocate for something this year? And then give the subject matter to David and myself. Don't worry about the words. We know what the goals are. We'll see about exactly how we could develop something with leadership such that it meets the intent of our goals and it could be something that they would present to council.
Is there anything to lose if we ask?
I don't think there's anything to lose.
Right, so why not?
I think it's a statement to say, hey,
It's important enough.
don't forget about us, you know,
But-
you seated us on this committee.
Right.
We want to make sure that you don't forget about these goals.
You asked us to
Here's
be
some
here.
suggestions.
Additionally, it's in our annual report that we will support implementation of federal and North Carolina clean energy legislation, policy and programs. So being that that was just highlighted in our end of year 2023 report, I know that this is kind of I understand the process was whatever it was, but it feels like starting off this year, I don't think we should, I think we're all in agreement that we should not be skipping this opportunity to get a little bit more specific about it. So I'm wondering if there is language even from our annual report that would allow us, since we talk directly to or speaking directly to advocating for this legislation, that we could pull and then to your point, leave the packaging of the communication over to y'all for however you think it would be best.
So
ingested.
I'll go ahead and just make a motion to direct city staff or recommend to city staff, whether it be through revision or supplement, to create a statement to add to the 2024 legislative agenda, discussing or including the clean energy goals of the city. And then I
I'll
will
second that motion.
seconded. I would also, sorry, Jessica, I wasn't quite done.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I would add
We're getting
to
close
that-
to 2:30.
I would add to that, that one city staff has their verbiage, if the motion carries and city staff puts together a statement for us, that they can push that to us before the next meeting, so that we can vote on it and get it sent to them as soon as possible, rather than having to wait. So that would be my motion. Jessica, do you still second it?
And now I will second that motion
All right,
as
so
completed.
we have a motion and a second, so we have to take a roll call vote, because we have people on Zoom, so we'll start with Sean.
I'm not gonna say
Aye,
it.
aye or nay?
Yes,
Aye.
yes.
Yes,
Yes,
Hi.
PJ?
I'm waiting for you.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I'm an aye since I seconded, but yeah, aye. Thank you.
Aye.
all right.
What a gentleman,
That's it.
Such a gentleman.
The motion's unanimously carried, so we'll direct city staff to do that.
I'll draft something up and circulate it.
Sounds great.
Perfect.
Just a question to follow up on what Sean said, once they review it, how do we monitor or how do we influence what happens with what we're suggesting? Do we follow up with them on occasion, or if we have any concerns, based on this document, how do we get,
My understanding is that we take that to city staff. So the Davids, we will, if you have a particular like legislative item that you want city council to participate in, then you would bring that here and then we would discuss it and then make the recommendation to city staff if that needs to be passed on to.
And just so you know, I prefer the 2 days, not the days.
And I think it works the opposite works the same way as well. Like if you wanted an update about something that city council has
Right.
done, we ask them, they get that information for us and bring it back to us.
You know, again, if it's something like, we forward a public comment letter or some kind of statement that we'd like the city to sign off on, we could say, and this is, you know, directly supported by the resolution that, you know, you signed in support of advocating for state energy efforts. So it's kind of like another reference point that we can tie back into. So it's not only supports our clean energy goals and our greenhouse gas reduction goals, but it also supports this
2024 legislative agenda.
Yep.
All right, any other discussion, or I'll give everyone 6 minutes of their lives back? Nope. Okay, last question for everybody is just, is there anything that anyone would like to see on the agenda for next month? Besides maybe an update on this.
Maybe just that thing about the requirement for EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure on new development. If we could drill down on that a little bit, find out where we stand.
I know the folks in the room heard, but this will probably be the last meeting that we hold in this space. I'll be looking at some space over at the Skyline Center.
Are you going shopping, real estate shopping for your
Yes.
spot?
So for our April meeting, we will hopefully be over in the Skyline Center.
All right, I'll be sure to physically come just in case we should be all set up, I guess, for the Zoom still, but I was planning to get in there today and just couldn't make it happen. So see you there. Sounds great.
Is there any kind of access or security kind of thing where we'll need to be on some list of?
More to come, I assume.
Oh, you're on the list.
Just so it's different, you know, sometimes with sliding in at
Th-
12:57.
there is-
12:50.
I think we'll try and accommodate that at the beginning of the meeting. As long as we can get it set up. But yeah, you have to
I'm sure.
sign in and
protocols.
get a sticker and. walk
And I'm
through.
sure you'll send that to us via email.
Yeah,
before we
we'll
get
make
there.
sure to, but yeah, there's a much higher level of security at that building.
Sounds good. All right, in that case, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.